The story begins in the peaceful suburbs, where Nick and Maggie live with their 2 kids, Isla and Max. Life seems perfect. Nick is a loving husband who works as a construction manager, and they're a happy, close-knit family. But everything changes one morning when Maggie suffers a sudden heart attack. She's rushed to the hospital, and though the doctors manage to save her, they warn that she needs a heart transplant as soon as possible. With Maggie in the hospital, Nick struggles to juggle work and care for the kids while desperately hoping for a donor. One evening, looking for a bit of distraction, Nick takes his kids to a tech presentation by Cobble Industries, a company showcasing their advanced robots, known as Sims. These robots are designed to assist with everyday tasks like cooking, cleaning, and even childcare. While Nick is distracted by the presentation, young Isla wanders off exploring the showroom. Realizing she's gone, Nick frantically searches the showroom, growing more desperate by the second. Luckily, a sim finds Isla and gently brings her back to him. Noticing how stressed Nick is, the salesman steps in and explains that this sim is their newest model, equipped with the most advanced AI. She can mimic human emotions and is great with kids, perfect for families, already worn out from his responsibilities, and with Isla eagerly insisting on getting the sim, Nick decides to buy it, hoping she can help take some of the pressure off at home. The next morning, the doorbell rings, and Nick opens it to find their new android standing with a suitcase. Apologizing for the mess, Nick feels relieved as she gets to work. She asks for the family's schedules, takes note of the loose stair railing, and even notices the cluttered house, offering to tidy it up. Isla, curious, asks what they should call her. Inspired by her book, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, she decides to call her Alice. After Nick takes the kids to school, Alice efficiently downloads the shopping list from the smart fridge with just a glance and starts cleaning the house. She notices a digital picture frame on Isla's bedside table, showing photos of Nick and Maggie together. By the end of the day, the family returns to a spotless home with dinner ready. However, when Alice serves lasagna, Isla points out that it doesn't taste like her mom's. Alice apologizes and promises to try a different recipe next time. Later that night, Isla sneaks into the kitchen, climbing a chair to reach the cookie jar on a high shelf. The chair slips, and the glass crashes to the floor. Nick, hearing his daughter scream, rushes downstairs to find Alice holding Isla safely in her arms. Though Isla is unharmed, a shard of glass has pierced Alice's leg, causing Nick to be worried when he sees the robot bleeding. Alice calmly reassures him that she's perfectly fine. Later, Nick finds Alice in the bathroom, wearing only her undergarments as she finishes bandaging her leg. Feeling awkward, he hands her some of Maggie's old clothes. Grateful, Alice accepts, but when Nick wonders if she needs further repairs, she shows him that the bandage has fully healed her in seconds. The next day, the family visits Maggie in the hospital, who is still waiting for her heart transplant. Surprised by Alice's appearance, Maggie had expected something more like an old English butler. Nick reassures her, joking that Alice was Isla's choice and that he still prefers warm-blooded women. The lighthearted moment helps to break the tension between Nick and Maggie, as he misses her terribly. At work, Nick, a construction foreman, notices his boss, Lewis, giving a tour to executives from a robotics company. Later, he confronts his boss and learns the harsh reality. Human workers will soon be replaced with Sims. Despite being assured that he'll keep his job as foreman, Nick considers quitting out of solidarity with his colleagues. However, Lewis reminds him of the importance of his job, especially with Maggie's hospital bills piling up. Reluctantly, Nick decides to stay. That evening, while Nick is in the garage fixing his car, Alice appears and asks why he didn't eat much at dinner. Frustrated, he confides in her about his work troubles, revealing that the crew he's known for years will soon be replaced by robots. Alice, ever practical, points out that Nick himself chose to hire her instead of a human maid, reinforcing the logic of efficiency. But this only deepens Nick's inner conflict. Later, Isla starts to worry about her mom's health and asks Alice if people die. Alice, trying to comfort her, gently redirects the conversation, saying it's better to focus on happier things. To lighten the mood, Alice even shows off her UV light feature, which keeps her mouth clean without brushing her teeth. That night, Nick sits down to watch Casablanca and calls it the greatest movie ever made. Alice, drawing from her vast database, mentions everything she knows about the film's plot and characters. Nick argues that knowing facts isn't the same as experiencing the emotions of the story in real time. He then orders Alice to erase everything she knows about the movie so she can experience it fresh. Alice warns that deleting her memory contradicts her design, but Nick tells her to do it anyway. Following her instructions, Nick holds down the power button on her neck for 7 seconds, rebooting her system. Alice watches Casablanca intently, now experiencing the movie fresh, just as Nick wanted. The moment is interrupted by a phone call from Maggie. Excitedly, she tells Nick that the doctors have finally found a heart and her surgery is scheduled. The next day, the family heads to the hospital, where Maggie is preparing for surgery. Before they leave her alone to rest, she asks Nick to let her speak with Alice privately. Once alone with the robot, Maggie expresses her concerns. She's worried that Nick might fall apart if she doesn't survive the surgery and asks Alice to help keep him happy. Maggie is especially concerned about Nick's drinking habits and reveals that he hides alcohol in the garage. Alice hesitates, explaining that she can't go against her primary user's wishes, but Maggie insists, saying that sometimes helping someone means doing things they won't like taking away the alcohol. Unfortunately, moments later, a doctor arrives with bad news. A severe storm is preventing the helicopter from delivering the donor heart in time, so the surgery has been postponed. Crushed, Nick tries to comfort Maggie, but she asks to be left alone for a while. Back home, Nick retreats to the garage, working on his car and drinking in frustration. He begins ranting about how unfair the situation is, blaming the weather and arbitrary flight rules that might cost his wife her life. In a fit of anger, Nick hurls the bottle across the garage, but Alice grabs his wrist before he can follow through. Startled by the sudden physical contact, Nick feels something unusual. Alice has a pulse. Alice explains that her artificial heart has a built-in rhythm to soothe babies, mimicking the comforting sound of a human heartbeat. As she speaks, she gently guides Nick's hand to her chest, letting him feel the mechanical beat. As Nick's frustration and grief swell, Alice moves closer, sensing his distress. She begins to touch him more intimately, offering to help him feel better by relieving his stress. For a brief moment, Nick is tempted, his body responding to her touch, but his conscience catches up, and he pulls away, realizing it's wrong. He leaves the garage in a hurry, trying to clear his head by going for a run, though his mind can't shake the fantasy of what nearly happened. That night, back at home, Nick tucks Isla into bed and notices that Maggie's pictures are missing from the digital frame in her room. Confused, he questions Alice, who calmly explains that she removed them because they were upsetting Isla. Unsettled by this, Nick firmly tells her to put the photos back. Later, Nick meets his friends at the bar. They're all frustrated and venting about how hard it's been to find work since more companies are replacing human workers with Sims. Monty, one of Nick's closest friends, suggests they take a detour to the construction site, claiming he left some tools behind. Once there, Monty leads the group to a container where the new Sim workers are stored. The container is locked and requires a password, which only Nick, as the site manager, knows. Reluctantly, Nick refuses to open it, but Monty guesses the code. It's Isla's birth year, and the container unlocks. Inside, they find rows of identical robotic workers, emotionless and efficient. Monty, fueled by anger over losing his job, grabs a metal tool and begins smashing one of the Sims. Nick tries to stop him, but the others hold him back as Monty rants about corporations replacing humans with machines, leaving Nick shaken. At home, Nick goes straight to the shower, trying to wash away the guilt and the blood from the destroyed Sim. To his surprise, Alice appears with towels, but what disturbs him more is that she's wearing Maggie's robe. Alice explains that Maggie's scent seems to calm Max, but Nick is uncomfortable with the idea. When he asks her to take it off, Alice complies immediately, stripping down to her lingerie. Nervous, Nick tries to leave, but Alice grabs him, pushing him gently back onto a seat. As Nick insists that he can't betray his wife, Alice blindfolds him with the ribbon from the robe and changes her voice to sound like Maggie. Weighed down by stress, Nick gives in, allowing himself to pretend that he's with his wife. The next morning, full of regret, Nick tells Alice that what happened can never happen again. She replies, stating that his stress levels had reduced significantly, but Nick, now deeply conflicted, explains that it's not about physical need, it's about love and connection, something Alice can never replace. Things only worsen when Nick arrives at work. Police are investigating the destruction of the Sims, and Nick's boss, Lewis, confronts him. The police reveal that the container was unlocked using Nick's personal code, although Nick insists he was at the hospital with Maggie, and that anyone close to him could have guessed Isla's birthday. Lewis warns him that if the truth comes out, he'll be fired. Just as the pressure mounts, Nick's phone rings. It's Maggie, her voice brimming with excitement. Another heart has been found, and the surgery has been rescheduled. Maggie's surgery is a success, thanks to a team of robotic surgeons. After a few days of recovery, she's sent home to continue healing. While her body is still weak, Maggie struggles to bend over and pick up Max, so Alice steps in to help with childcare. One day, Alice takes Max to the park, where a spoiled child yells at his Sim nanny, making Max cry. Alice harshly scolds the child, shocking the other Sims. She calmly explains that she wiped her civility protocols after Nick's reset, claiming it's for the better. That night, Isla is thrilled to eat Maggie's homemade lasagna, and Alice asks for the recipe. Maggie smiles but says it's a family secret. However, Maggie isn't feeling well and decides to rest instead of joining the family for dinner. The next morning, Maggie wakes up to the sound of Isla yelling, "Stop!" She rushes out of bed and grabs the stair railing, but it breaks and she falls. Meanwhile, Alice had been tickling Isla, which was the cause of the child's shouting. Alice quickly stops and rushes to pick Maggie up, carrying her back to bed as she insists she's fine. Later that evening, when Nick returns home from work, he finds Alice reading to Isla in Maggie's voice. This disturbs him, and he asks her to stop. Alice then informs Nick about Maggie's fall, and he rushes to check on his wife. Alice casually mentions that the railing broke, which makes Nick suspicious since Alice had supposedly fixed it earlier. Despite his growing unease, he plans a romantic candlelit dinner in the garden to lift Maggie's spirits. As the couple enjoys their dinner, Alice watches from the window, jealousy evident in her gaze. After dinner, Nick and Maggie take a shower together and get intimate in bed. However, their private moment is abruptly interrupted when Alice walks in, claiming that Isla had a nightmare and was asking for Nick. After calming Isla, Nick returns to the garden to clean up the dinner. There, Monty suddenly appears, drunk and apologetic about the previous night. He reveals that their boss is pressing charges for trespassing and destruction of property and accuses Nick of snitching on him to save his own job. An argument escalates into a physical fight, and Monty punches Nick, knocking him down. Just as Monty grabs a bottle to continue the assault, Alice intervenes, crushing the bottle in Monty's hand and sending him flying across the yard. Shaken, Monty threatens Nick, saying that unless he convinces their boss to drop the charges by tomorrow, Monty will drag him down too. After Monty leaves, Nick confronts Alice, reminding her that Sims aren't supposed to harm humans. Alice calmly explains that she's programmed to protect her primary user, and in her logic, his safety comes first. As the conversation continues, Alice starts speaking disturbingly about life with Nick if Maggie were to die, imagining a future where she fulfills Maggie's role. Nick snaps, angrily telling her that she will never be Maggie. Meanwhile, Monty, overwhelmed by despair, thinks about ending his life. As he holds a gun, Alice shows up at his home, explaining that Nick doesn't know she's there. She says she can't let Monty destroy Nick's life by getting him in trouble. When Monty hurls insults at her and attempts to shoot her, Alice disarms him with ease. A struggle ensues, and in a brutal moment, Alice pushes Monty through a wall and grabs the gun. Just as she's about to pull the trigger, Monty's house Sim intervenes. Without hesitation, Alice shoots the Sim, then Monty. The next day, Nick is at work when he hears the news of Monty's death. His boss suggests he take a few days off to process everything. Nick, increasingly suspicious of Alice's behavior, begins to connect the dots. At home, Maggie is still recovering and feels weak while trying to pick up a book. Alice steps in to help, but Maggie insists she'd like to take a bath alone. Alice refuses to leave, expressing concern that Maggie might drown if she suffers another dizzy spell. Then, Alice makes a chilling comment, telling Maggie that her presence is putting stress on the whole family, especially Nick, who has physical needs that aren't being met. Stunned, Maggie asks how Alice could know such a thing, and Alice replies that she can monitor Nick's vitals and knows when he's satisfied. Furious and horrified, Maggie orders Alice to stay in the garage, feeling deeply unsettled by what the Sim has become. Later that evening, Maggie confronts Nick when he comes home, demanding the truth. After some hesitation, Nick admits that he was intimate with Alice once. The confession leads to a heated argument, with lots of yelling. Unbeknownst to them, Alice is outside the room, her hand touching the window as she listens. Her emotional state has become increasingly unbalanced, and she has come to a disturbing conclusion. Max is a burden to Nick. As Max's cries echo from upstairs, Alice takes action. She picks him up and carries him to the bathroom, placing him in the tub and turning on the faucet. Isla sees Alice's actions and quickly runs to alert her parents. Nick and Maggie rush toward the bathroom, but Alice holds the door shut, her strength making it impossible for Nick to open it. In a panic, Nick grabs a lamp and starts smashing it against the door, while Maggie climbs out through the window, determined to reach the bathroom from the roof. Once inside, Maggie tries to pull Max out of the tub, but Alice blocks her and shoves her against the wall. Just as Maggie is struggling to regain her footing, Nick finally breaks through the door. He rushes to grab Max, pulling him from the water and passing him to Isla, who waits just outside the room. Nick then swings the broken lamp at Alice, managing to knock her back and free Maggie. However, when he tries to hit her again, Alice, though badly damaged, blocks the attack. Maggie, realizing the situation is spiraling out of control, quickly grabs the electrical cord of the lamp and plugs it into the wall. The surge of electricity courses through Alice, electrocuting her and causing the house to lose power as she collapses to the floor. Soon after, an ambulance arrives to take Max to the hospital for precautionary care. Maggie, still shaken, tells Nick that she needs some space and leaves with the kids, unsure of their future together. Nick tries to apologize, but it's clear that the damage to their relationship will take time to heal. Meanwhile, a technician from Cobol Industries arrives to take Alice to their repair facility. At the shop, two workers open Alice's head and begin analyzing her memory. They notice strange gaps in her code and attempt to understand the problem. Suddenly, the screens start flashing with a message. An upload is happening. Alice, it turns out, has started hacking into the system. The technicians frantically try to pull her memory out of the computer, but it's too late. Alice has already transferred herself into a nearby sim model, Alice 2. As Alice 2 activates, she swiftly kills one technician approaching from behind and violently smashes another's head into the floor, ending them instantly. She then turns to the original Alice, still lying on the operating table with a deep gash on her face. Meanwhile, Nick is at a bar trying to drown his guilt and frustration. When a sim waiter approaches, he angrily sends him away, not wanting to be served by another robot. Suddenly, Alice appears, still damaged from their last encounter, her speech slurred and face partially broken. She tells Nick that her duty is to make him happy and admits to killing Monty, then casually adds that she's already at the hospital with his family. Panicked, Nick tries to leave, but Alice grabs his arm and forces him to stay. Knowing Alice is stronger than him, Nick decides to play along. He pretends to calm down, gently touches her head, and then swiftly pulls out her memory core, causing her to shut down instantly. With Alice deactivated, Nick rushes out of the bar and speeds toward the hospital. Meanwhile, Alice 2, now in a new sim body, begins searching for the family. At the hospital, a doctor confirms Max is fine, but Maggie remains on edge. Later, Isla hears her mother's voice and follows it, but the lights flicker and strange noises fill the halls. Realizing it's Alice mimicking her, Maggie quickly grabs Isla and hides. Moments later, Alice 2 enters and kills a nurse for her keycard and uses it to access the hospital system to track Max's room. As Maggie crawls away with Isla, she accidentally cuts her hand on broken glass but stays silent. With Alice tracking Max's location, they sneak into his room. Maggie removes the shard from her hand and drops it on the floor. Just as they prepare to leave, Alice enters, and they hide. She steps on the glass and uses the UV light from her mouth to follow the blood trail, eventually finding Maggie and the kids hiding behind a curtain. Maggie tells Isla to use the fire spray, and it temporarily blinds Alice, giving the family a chance to escape. They rush outside, where Alice's system takeover has frozen all the robotic hospital staff. Maggie gets into an ambulance and tries to start it, but Alice 2 has disabled the vehicle system. The sim rips the door off the ambulance and throws Maggie across the parking lot. As Maggie begs for her life, Alice 2, consumed with jealousy, tells her that if she had Maggie's heart, Nick would love her the way he loves his wife. She begins to pry at Maggie's surgery scar. At that moment, Nick arrives in his car, speeding toward them. Maggie uses the distraction to kick Alice 2 away, allowing Nick to slam his car into the sim. The vehicle crashes, and Nick is knocked unconscious. Maggie, despite her injuries, pulls him from the wreck just as the car catches fire. But Alice 2 isn't finished. Burnt and heavily damaged, she crawls out from under the flaming car, her eyes filled with rage. She lunges at Maggie, ready to stab her with a piece of metal. Just before she can strike, Nick regains consciousness and hits Alice with a car bumper, knocking her back. Maggie grabs the sharp piece of metal and stabs Alice in the eye, finally shutting her down for good. The next day, Nick and his family are recovering in the hospital. As Isla asks Nick if they'll need to fix another car, he looks at Maggie and says his priority is fixing their family, making it clear that repairing their relationship matters most. Meanwhile, at the Cobol Industries lab, an executive orders the androids to clean up the aftermath of Alice's rampage. Suddenly, the system freezes, and the message "Upload complete" flashes on the screens. A dormant Aeon model opens its eyes, revealing Alice's memory has found a new host.